Welcome back to Brothers and Boss Battles, a video game showdown. This is your friendly neighborhood podcast where we discuss video games, new and old. I'm Anthony, and along with my brothers Pete and Tom, we are about to embark on another journey of video game discussion. In case you don't know how this podcast works, we take a genre or category of video games, choose 3 games that fit within that genre or category, and discuss those 3 games, one per episode. Then, in the 4th episode of that block, 3 previous discussed games go up against each other, and the brothers will argue which one should come out on top. Halloween is approaching in the US, and today's episode features the second game in our survival horror category, and that game is the Callisto Protocol, released on December 2nd, 2022. It was developed by Striking Distance Studios and published by Krafton. It was made available for the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and Windows. Creepy scientist, a corrupt warden, and lots of monsters. Can you survive the horror and escape the prison on Jupiter's second largest moon? All right, Callisto Protocol. Tom, why don't you give us some initial thoughts?
Sure. So I'm the one who suggested this one for the survival horror category, and I was excited to play this game. When it was first announced, back during its development, it was a lot of comparisons are being thrown around that it was like a spiritual successor to Dead Space, which is a game that I really enjoyed. A series that I really enjoyed, all the Dead Space games. That was a pretty big comparison there. And it was also directed by the series creator of Dead Space. His name is Glenn Schofield. This one was like high on my radar. I thought this was going to be a great game because of that. But I mean, in hindsight, that was probably like very big shoes for this game to fill. And we're going to get into it, but I don't think it filled those shoes adequately.
So I'll go next with my initial thoughts. So I played this on PS5, and I have to say, I'll keep it brief here. I have to say, when I first started playing it, it seemed cool. Then right after initially started playing it, it was sort of like, oh man, this is dragging. And then I'll say it really came on in the end. And in the second half or maybe the fourth quarter, but I thought it had a lot of fun elements that made it a worthwhile game to play eventually. A little repetitive and stale up front, but it definitely gets better, and we'll get into it some more. Pete, some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I won't take too long. Kind of echoing what you guys said. Definitely didn't fill the shoes I think that we had hoped. Um, Definitely picked up a little bit at the end, and also agree with your comment about it kind of, especially at the beginning, being stale and repetitive.
Right. So just like as sort of a brief synopsis of the game before we get into it more, you're a essentially an outer space trucker, but you fly spaceships instead, and you're delivering a package, as part of your duties. There's a prison on the moon of Callisto, and that is where you were headed during this sort of part of your job. You wind up getting boarded, and that leads to a crash. And when you crash, there's folks from the prison who come, and you're kind of in a daze, and you kind of ask them for help because you've just crashed, and instead they arrest you and throw you in this prison. And obviously, lead character Jacob Lee is totally dumbfounded as to this and why he's there. While you're there, there's an outbreak of some sort of virus that starts turning all of the inmates into zombies, seemingly, or at least these sort of like parasite creatures. And you set out to escape. You meet some people on the way, and eventually towards the end you uncover a big reveal that we'll get into later. And just with that said, as a quick reminder, that's that we might be talking about the game story and a lot of other elements. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't played and want to play and don't want any of the story ruined, uh, you know, just be cautious while listening. We're going to try to maybe keep some of the more revealing story items to towards the end, so you could catch at least a little bit of the beginning of the review. So, what do you guys think? I kind of feel like survival horror. A big part of that is weapon management and weapons, and the fighting elements. What do you guys think of that?
I could start off. So, I mean, like you guys mentioned, this game started off super slow, from many aspects, but I think also a combat related aspect. I felt like it took so long to get your first firearm in the game. They left you using just the melee weapons for such a long time, and I was really surprised by that, especially because I didn't really feel that the melee combat system was very. I didn't find it fun, first of all, but I didn't find it well implemented either.
So, all right, so let's I guess focus on that, because that's a big portion. And for those who haven't played, it's essentially it is much more melee focused than firearm focused. Well, but there are guns that you have almost throughout the entire game. And what you do is swing. You wind up getting a basically like a police baton that also has like a stun element to it, almost like a taser and a stick. But it's you swing it by using the R2 button, which is interesting because I feel like that button's sort of floppy, and to use that for the main sort of melee mechanic was definitely a little bit challenging at first. And along with that, the enemies are very fast moving in this game. So there's a dodge mechanic with the left stick. You dodge left to right, or pull back on it to block.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt like it was just very cumbersome to me. Like the enemies would be coming at you, and I just feel like they would like almost like teleport to you. Once they started their like wind up, like even if you moved away, they would just like get to you, which was like weird to me. I don't know, did anyone else feel that way? But they kind of just like sucked in.
No,
Like,
no, but I kind of see what you're saying now that you're saying it, but I didn't really have that original thought myself. Um, but I also agree. This is like so weak. Like the first time, literally the first time where you dodge and then you hit the enemy or whatever. I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then like literally the second time, I was like, okay, this is lame. And like the dodging was, I don't know what the best word is. Silly to me. It's just like you dodge left, you dodge right, you dodge left. Okay, and now you attack them once or twice, and then
Yeah,
you dodge left, you dodge right, you dodge left. And then as you
yeah,
as you progress through the game, at that point you did have firearms, but you might be fighting somebody for like 5 minutes if you know, I had times where maybe I was conserving ammo or whatever, and it was ridiculous. It was so like automatic, you just keep
yeah. You didn't even have to like time the dodges. It
yeah,
was just like you
you
hold the
didn't have
button,
to.
and like
Yeah.
yeah, you could hold it. I mean, the only time, yeah, if you ever faced an enemy one on one, it was really just unchallenging and uninteresting. I mean, it got a little bit more interesting when you were facing a group of enemies, but not that that was rare, but I mean, it also wasn't in the sense that you would necessarily be overwhelmed. Um, it was an interesting sort of mechanic to have melee weapon be your main item in a survival horror game, I thought.
Yeah, I mean they've tried something different there. I just don't think they did a good enough job to make that the focus.
I mean, and the other thing is I felt like almost all the guns were very weak in this game. And I almost didn't want to use them. I wanted it like we'll talk about the upgrade system, but I upgraded that melee weapon like a lot. And I felt like the guns were sort of supplementary, where there was a kind of cool mechanic where if you hit them back with your melee weapon, then you would do like a skill shot, almost like a little bullseye kind of a thing would appear on a body part of the enemy, and you would do a quick R2 shot, and it would shoot your gun out at them. I
Yeah,
thought that
so
was pretty cool.
after your kind of sequence or combo of melee attacks, then it was kind of like an auto aim, and you would do one firearm attack,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. No, I agree. That was cool, and at times I was using that instead of shooting them a couple of times. I would do the melee combo and then get the one shot in.
Yeah, and then I mean the bosses you pretty much had to use guns on. Uh
Yeah, I didn't feel the the guns were that weak. Um, I mean, I
Me
did
either.
upgrade them. I did upgrade them, and
Same.
the ammo was pretty plentiful in this game.
Oh, it's very plentiful.
Very plentiful.
I
Yeah.
felt like, I mean, especially at the beginning of the game before you get the that spacesuit that gives you more inventory spots. Like I was leaving behind so many items.
Oh yeah. So
That's in
okay, to get into that, then the item that I was leaving behind the most was that the GRP battery. So
Yeah,
that's
me
like the
too.
gravity glove.
yeah, so that's the other weapon you get in this
Yeah.
game. It's the which I think is reminiscent to Dead Space, but it's essentially a glove that allows you to it basically gives you telekinetic powers. And honestly, I thought a really cool item because there are sort of environmental hazards in this game that you can use to your advantage. So if you have this GRP glove, you can, pick enemies up and throw them into a wall of spikes or throw them into a spinning blade or, throw them off the edge of something. And that was sort of the way to get around big groups of enemies because guns weren't, in my opinion, that great. And the melee, if you're meleeing a group of five enemies, you're probably not going to make it. So the GRP glove was really important for that, and I think cool. I think it kind of made things a little too easy sometimes. But otherwise it was fun to use.
Yeah, there was a lot of times where you'd be in a room and you'd see spikes on the wall and be like, okay, let me just pick up every enemy and throw them to the wall for a one hit kill.
Yeah, and then there
It
was
was cool though.
no, I agree it was cool, and I think at least for me, and I think all of us are probably gonna have a lot of issues and complaints about the game, but as we're talking, I really like the I like the guns, the variety of guns. I liked this this GRP glove, and I like the upgrade system. So that kind of aspect of the combat, I really like.
Yeah, let's talk. I could talk a little bit. I liked even like the graphical representation of the upgrade system because essentially you'd put your gun or your baton or a chip that would go into your glove into this
Like
into
a
this.
3D printer.
It was, yeah, essentially looked like a 3D printer, and the arms would come and like print an extra piece for your gun or a chip for your glove, and it was really cool looking. So that was fun too.
I agree. It's just even the way they did that was also cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is, less than 2 years old game. So, I mean, the graphics are top notch. Just
Yeah, it's
the
cool.
mo
If you when you look up the actor who voiced Jacob, like it looks just like the character in the game. It's
yeah.
crazy how they're able to do that.
Yeah, I think he is like an actual actor. Actually, I think they used actual like people that have
Well,
acted in other things for this.
yeah, voice actors are actual actors.
No, but you know what I meant. I think he's done.
Someone who's appeared in TV shows
Yeah,
and
like I
whatnot.
think
Yeah.
Danny, another character, is I think she was in The Boys, that show. And I also think the guy who played Captain Ferris was an actor as well. Maybe one of you guys can look it up while we're talking. Yeah. So I mean, that's a little bit about the weapons. Some other game mechanics. When you defeat an enemy, you could stomp on them, and that would generally reveal health or weapons or just items that you would use to sell in order to get money to upgrade your weapons. So I think that was, and I'm pretty sure like every character dropped one. So that was likely why there was such a plentiful amount of weapons and or bullets and health and things like that.
Yeah, and you could also just find these things and the money, the Callisto credits,
Yeah.
just in the environment, even without killing. So
Yeah, I mean, so that was an interest. Yeah, exactly. And there were these certain boxes you could pick up with the grip and smash against the wall, and that would also reveal either credits or health or bullets as well.
What do you guys think
Yes.
of the yeah, since we were talking about weapons, the mechanic of switching your weapon.
Yeah, that was sort
This
of a yeah, that was sort
that
of a
that
down
yeah.
mark, I think.
Yeah, I found it just so hard to use. Like, it's you're so used to in these kind of games where you just press up, down, left, right on the D-pad to
Hmm.
switch your weapons, which makes sense. But in this game, you can only switch between two, and then if you wanted to switch to one of the other ones, you have to go into your inventory and then kind of equip it from there.
No, is
But
that true? You could.
Yeah,
It basically
you could
brought up
only if it
a menu, and you
no,
could kind of scroll down.
that was a lot.
It was a lot. Yeah.
Usually,
yeah,
like
yeah,
we talked about the Evil Within last week and or last episode, and you could set four weapons to your D-pad
Yeah.
essentially. So
Right. Right.
if you click,
yeah,
if you click left, you have your pistol. If you click up, you have your rifle. If you click right, you have your health, and if you click down, you have your shotgun. This
yeah. But in this game,
left,
you cannot do that.
yeah. If you press left, you could set two guns to be like if you press left, so you could cycle between those two. And then if you wanted to get one of your other ones, so you were able to hold them. And we'll after this we'll talk about like the inventory system or lack thereof. But technically were holding them all because you could use them. But if it wasn't that quick switch by pressing left between two guns, you had to press right and then cycle through all of them and then get to the one you want, then press X because there was a ton of times where I would like cycle through them and like I would think like if it waited a second it would go to that gun and it didn't. So
Yeah, yeah. And then you also have to. It does like a switching animation where he pulls like one piece off of
yeah,
like basically like
the base of the gun
the whole
essentially.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then
and that
that's another
was
thing. Like there was basically like a primary gun and a secondary gun, and you can't have both of your primaries uh, equipped to like the left quick switch button.
yeah.
So that made it harder to switch. But I mean, like most of the time, it's not that big a deal. But like when I mean, I found sometimes during boss battles, especially like the last one, the final one, but where like I ran out of ammo
Hmm.
on my two that I had set, and
Yeah.
that
And it
was
was
it was too hard. It took too long
yeah. No, I agree.
pick your other gun, and then also same thing with the semi-related, same thing with the health injectors, whereas like
Well,
you couldn't just use those on the fly. You had to go into your inventory to use it, and
yeah.
that's really tricky to do in a boss fight.
Yeah. So I agree with you on on 2 points. The issue really didn't come up with the guns other than in the boss battles. And yeah, it was tough because even though you got a lot of ammo, you couldn't necessarily hold all the ammo all the time. So
Yeah,
and the bosses did hit pretty hard in this game. I'll give them that. Whereas a lot of the regular fights were just very repetitive. Um, and somewhat non-challenging at points. The boss battles, I mean, once you got their patterns down, it really wasn't too bad, but sort of it sort of artificially made it hard by making it extra hard to switch to your guns, and you couldn't really use your grip or your uh baton on the bosses. So the guns did become important then, and like the yeah, I agree 100%. With regard to the health injector, I do agree with the fact that it was kind of dumb that you had to go into your inventory and select it and then hold down X, I think it was, to use it. I think it was interesting and probably a good thing that the animation to inject yourself with the health thing, you know, took a couple of seconds and you can be hit and damaged when that's happening because that added an extra sort of layer of
yeah.
challenge.
I'm not complaining about that. Like that,
Mm,
it was challenging to use it
yeah,
No,
like
it was
or
silly. I kind of
successfully.
yeah,
I think I know what you're saying. It was just like silly. So like whenever I had to use the health injection, like during the final boss, for example, he would kind of just like try to like navigate really quick, like open inventory, right,
yeah,
X, and then like that that silliness to me in a game in 2024,
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah, I
Especially
agree.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to make in a survival horror sort of way, and like every semi-modern survival horror, you have that D-pad for four weapons, and that's part of the strategy because it's like you have to decide what you're going to put there, and maybe you don't put health in one of those, and then you kind of get screwed by it. But at least that's a decision you made with the option. So yeah, you know, and that's sort of goes to the inventory system. It's really not there.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
I
you have a
mean,
just
limited number of spots,
yeah,
and
that's true. I mean, you
there were
do.
times where I had to drop things.
Yeah, that's
there's
true.
so many times
Yeah, yeah,
early on. I that was one of the things I felt is that they really should have given you that suit sooner, like earlier into the game. Like, the
Well,
suit when you go outside after you like,
yeah, but that's
get.
basically like the third level, right? I mean, you get it.
I don't think it's that early.
No? Well, you're talking about like when you go out in the snow?
Yeah,
I thought that was level three because I thought it's like the prison,
maybe.
escaping from the prison is like the second level because the first chapter or whatever is that 15-minute prologue where you're just kind of learning stuff and you're on your ship. Then I thought chapter two was, I don't know. So,
I could be
yeah.
mistaken, but
Maybe it was chapter four, but
yeah.
regardless, before you get that suit, the game is quite easy, so you don't really feel bad about leaving things behind.
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't feel bad, but
And why don't we talk about, since this is in a survival horror category and it's, pretty much described as a survival horror game, there's no puzzles at all. Not that I remember. Do you remember any? I mean, it's certainly not a focus.
no, I don't think so.
Yeah. I don't think there's like literally one even sort of just attempt at a puzzle, which I like the puzzles in these games, in survival horror games.
Yeah, I mean there were a lot of like fuse boxes, right? Uh,
Yeah, they kept reusing that same
Yeah,
mechanic.
Which
you
one?
know that's not really a
Like,
puzzle. Like an
Which one?
it's you have to
empty
get like a
fuse box.
fuse.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you had to get a fuse from one box and put it in another box to open the door, basically.
Yeah, over and over again. And
Yeah, they kept
that
reusing
wasn't the
that.
only thing that occurred over and over again in this game.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean that was definitely going to come up. So, a- especially early on, a lot, you're trying to get out of the prison. So you wind up getting to like underneath the prison or in various corridors and things like that. And there's a lot of this game where you go down a long corridor, nothing happens. You go through a door, you go to another long corridor, nothing happens. Then you get to another long corridor, you fight a guy. Then you get to another you go through the door, get to another long corridor. Maybe you could, then we'll do that again and we get to one more. And I will say this, in a way, it's interesting they did that because I really think they were trying it to be real here. A prison system like this on a different planet's moon is going to have, I mean, that's how it would be. I mean, you're going to have, there's going to be corridors of corridors and, but, and there's just more realistic than, I don't know, a mansion with keys shaped like shamrocks or all this other
yeah. I mean,
stuff.
that's true, but it just doesn't lend itself well to a video game.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm saying I agree it wasn't great, but I think there was a reason for it. There's a lot of things in this game that I think they were trying to make real within the world that they were in.
Yeah, I don't know how much data we have for prisons on moons of
Yeah,
other planets, but I see what you're saying.
I just figured it was like sort of like a prison of on Earth, but just in space.
Yeah, so did that like add to the like fear factor or at least suspense for you guys? Where there was kind of a lot of walking and waiting for something to lurk
Uh,
or come out. Or just a general question, how did you guys find
the fear factor.
the fear factor?
I So not I really wasn't that afraid during this. I will say this because it's essentially a brand new game. The graphics are spectacular and the sound is very, very good as well. So, when you hear these moans and you hear in the distance and something's there and just little things like it's almost like a leaky pipe goes into a puddle on the floor and it's like that slight splash sound in this big echoey room, and like that could make you jump, and just things like that. Like, so because of the technical specs of this, that made it scary. But the game itself, I don't know. I mean, a lot of these villains were so, you know, otherworldly and deformed that it just kind of seemed not incredibly scary in that respect.
Yeah, I kind of agree. So I was reading that the creator wanted to make this basically the scariest game on the next gen consoles, the way Dead Space was considered to be the scariest game on like PS3 and Xbox 360, I think it is. But I did not feel that way at all. So more towards the beginning, the parts where I found the most scary, and even this was only maybe twice near the beginning, was when you're crawling through the vents, and then you would hear an enemy, or you would see like an enemy kind of move across the vent or something, or at the like
Yeah,
outside of the vent,
yeah.
and like I don't know if it's because you felt helpless, like I was claustrophobic maybe, but like and you couldn't attack while you were crawling through the vents. But then after the first time or two, you kind of realize because you can't do anything, nothing's going to happen to you. So then it kind of eliminated any sort of
Yeah.
emotion or fear.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because there were several times where I was crawling through stuff where I would go to like cock my gun, or aim my gun rather, and you couldn't do it. So it's like, okay, well, I mean, nothing's gonna happen to me.
Yeah, yeah,
I was hoping they weren't gonna like add a thing where they like make you have to retreat while crawling backwards, but they didn't. So sorry, spoilers.
Oh, you play a lot of survival horrors. Did you did you feel any like where this rank on the spectrum in terms of being scary or not?
It's really hard to say. I mean, the enemies themselves weren't all that, I don't know, inspired, I feel, from a like horror perspective. And they were all like very similar for most of the game. Um, I mean, the environments, like you mentioned, they were they were scary. Like with the lighting and everything, they did a good
Mhm.
job with that. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it too high on the list. I mean, there is the sense of like kind of isolation too, which adds can add to it. Where as far as you know, you're basically like the only person on this dark moon.
Yeah, and you feel like, you know, throughout the game, you believe you're falsely imprisoned. So it's also like all this stuff happening to me, and I didn't even do anything. I mean, so
Yeah,
there's that too. So it's like just like this hopelessness, and we got to get into the other characters, and the main character. Didn't really talk about him much. Um, and the some of the villain designs, and of course the story. So
Yeah,
we'll take a
before we
yeah.
get into that, just real quick, because we were talking about the inventory system, I think we're probably not going to come back to it. Did you guys notice that you would use X to drop an item, and then triangle use that item? And of course, you had to hold X, but
yeah,
like so many times, I would press X, and then I'd be like, oh snap, no, I won't,
yeah. I did
I
that
want to
too.
use that. I don't want to drop
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I thought that
That
was
was a weird choice. Yeah.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, luckily
Okay.
they made you hold it, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, I want to talk about the villain design a little bit more, but just first, quick fact that for those that don't know, Callisto is actually one of Jupiter's moons. It's Jupiter's second largest moon. So that's where this takes place. Now you know. Um, so yeah, the villain design. A lot of the villains are essentially mutated versions of the inmates that were there, and they have security robots, which don't really. I think there's one scene where you have to like stealth around it. Um, they're really not much to them. Uh, a lot of them are just sort of your general sort of baddie that you have to kind of get through. Uh, they do add an element later, somewhat later in the game, maybe midway, a little bit before the midway point, where they they're essentially blind and they attack you by hearing. So you have to, sneak around them, squatting, and then do stealth kills on them. So that was cool, but I will say this. I found it so funny about how loud and violent killing them was, and it wouldn't attract the other ones in the area. Like I kind of thought that was sort of a bad design there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually like for the most part, I like the parts where you had to like sneak kill the blinds, but it was kind of a little ridiculous how close you could get to them and they still wouldn't detect you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean it was cool that it was a little bit of a change up, but I don't know that it was implemented great.
Yeah, and then there were
Yeah.
I think they're called the rushers, like those crawling
Oh,
enemies.
were those the ones that exploded, or because there was other ones where they were like spider things that would explode on you.
No, I'm
Okay.
not talking about those.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember that, Tom?
Are you talking about the ones that were like in the trees and they would jump out at you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Those were
That
annoying.
part, yeah, that was annoying. I mean, that part of the game, I like, just as a quick aside, like if we weren't covering that this game on the pod, I think I would have stopped playing the game at that point. That was
Why?
like where the sentry robot was out patrolling, and then you have these things jumping out of the
Yeah,
trees
yeah.
attacking you.
Oh, those
It
things
was
that
just
turn
so
invisible.
annoying.
The things that turn invisible, like at times, they were like those sort of like more animal-like creatures that would like attack you, then sort
Yeah,
of run away real
And run
quick.
away. Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. Yeah, those were annoying, but they died pretty quickly, actually. Once you like actually were able to hit them in a combo, I didn't feel like they were overly powerful. It was just annoying.
Yeah, that part in particular was very annoying.
And then,
But yeah, I'm just getting back to the regular enemies. Like, yeah, there just wasn't really enough variety there. And like
yeah,
they start like you mentioned the point with the blind ones. It's like, yeah, that was cool, but they kept going with that same enemy type like for so long before
yeah,
they
It
switched it up again.
it went way too long, and like at some point, like just sneaking around, waiting for them to like turn their back to you or whatever.
Yeah.
It
I was like, yeah,
was,
this was cool for like the first time, but they kind of killed it.
yeah. I had the same feeling.
yeah. Then there were the ones that like spit acid, and like the key to that was sort of like shoot them in the head. And it wouldn't kill them because that's the thing. You could like sort of dismember parts of these enemies and it wouldn't kill them, but it would prevent that enemy from spitting acid at you anymore. So they'd have to come in close for more melee combat. Um, and then something they added like again around the midpoint, thereabouts, where the enemies would then they're already mutated and they would mutate further. So you'd beat them up a little bit, and then these like squid like tendrils would come out either from their stomach or their mouth, and if you gave a quick shot to those tendrils, you'd actually kill them right then and there. But if it was allowed too long to proceed with them mutating further, like a few seconds, then they would turn into this even more powerful, tankier villain where it would take many more shots to kill and they'd be more powerful. So that was again interesting, and again I think a little overplayed. Yeah. Any
Yeah,
thoughts
that
on
got
that?
annoying. That got annoying at times where like there was multiple enemies. One of them would start to like, mutate like that. And then the other one would kind of, I mean, like you would go to aim and then the other one would engage you in like a melee combat. So you automatically like the camera shifts to him so you can't shoot
Yeah.
the other guy who's mutating. Yeah, that was another problem I had. Like
Well,
the,
and
the,
another
the
thing with that,
camera during those melee encounters were just like
yeah,
it like forced you into that view, even if you didn't want to be there, which was stupid.
the other thing about those, sometimes when you hit them back and they would start those tendrils would come out and they start to mutate, you'd be set up for a skill shot and it wouldn't act like be where the tendrils were coming out. So then you had to like move it, like forcefully move it down to,
Yeah,
let's say,
yeah,
its stomach from its head. And that was, you would think if they were going to have this sort of automatic thing, it would go there. I mean, that would have probably made it too easy, but it was just weird. It was just like a weird unintended consequence, I feel, of the skill shot mechanic. And then other enemies, uh, we talked about repetitiveness. There is another enemy that you encounter that essentially has two heads and then like a mouth where its chest is, and those basically serve as that particular character serves as a mini boss, but it's the mini boss four times in the game. It's the same exact sort of mutated mini boss. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
a
the
tough
thing
one.
I was referring to
Yeah,
that occurs over and over again.
yeah. So that's it. Just seems
I
like they could have thought like different because you basically defeat it the same way each time. You have to shoot it in anywhere, but preferably the head because I think that gets him down the fastest. And then once he's like on a knee, then you hit him with your melee weapon, and you knock off one head, and then he gets up, and you kind of do it all over again. Um,
Yeah, I couldn't believe my eyes when I was fighting him a third and a fourth time.
Yeah,
I mean, and
yeah.
it was
That
like the
that was
same, like he didn't really evolve in any way. It was like the same fight every time. You got to do
yeah,
the same thing.
yeah.
It was
yeah.
just a different environment.
Right, and I I'm not sure if they did it in all four of the battles against him, but and just to be clear, I think it's four different of these two-headed monsters. I don't think it's like the same one keeps coming back. It's not like a nemesis from Resident Evil 3 kind of a thing, or whatever.
Wow,
But
making a lot of good comparisons in the non-bro down episode.
well, yeah, who's to say we're doing Resident Evil 3? I don't just naming a game that I'm sure a lot of our listeners know. But you screwed up my train of thought too. Thanks. So
You were you were saying how you think it's a different
oh, so the
creature every
only
time.
I'm not sure if they did this every time, but at least in some of those battles, like other enemies would appear, and that's what sort of changed it up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess.
No, but it was sort not great. I mean that four mini bosses were essentially
Yeah,
the same,
there were
and that's
six.
Yeah.
There were six
Well,
boss battles, and four of them were two-headed.
yeah, were that, and then two of them were the other guy who, like, the first phase is that,
oh yeah,
that melee segment where it's the same thing again.
yeah. So
You
Yeah,
dodge
so
four times and you hit him with the thing.
yeah, so that was
we'll
Captain Ferris, right?
right, and we'll
Yeah,
go
yeah.
into the more human characters. So we went from the fully mutated. Now this guy is like becomes mutated, but is um first human when you first see him. Uh, he's sort of the officer that takes you in, but he's obviously involved with the higher ups as to why this is all happening, and sort of is in the inn with these folks. So no, he's just a really tough, strong dude, and pretty authoritarian it seems, and he is part of this project or this protocol that and he's able to survive it to sort of keep some humanness to him, not but still becomes extra strong, and he's the other two battles you kind of face. He sort of looks almost like I'm gonna do another comparison, Pete. Sorry, but he doesn't he look like Mr. X from Resident Evil 2? Um, I don't know. I felt he kind of looks like that, but the first sort of time you face him, and then at the end he just turns into this big sort of
He's like a
abomination.
bald guy with, a chiseled jawline and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
He just looks like a strong guy, like a football player or MMA
No,
fighter or something.
yeah, but he gets no as a human, but then that first phase
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
somewhat mutated. He has like
Yeah, yeah.
gray skin or
Gray
something.
skin. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like extra big. And
I
then
was
the
thinking
let
like Drax from the Avengers.
yeah, okay, that's not bad. Um, and then the final version of him is, they did decide to. They're like, wait, we're survival horror. It has to be this giant abomination of a thing. So that's sort of the end.
Yeah, but
Um,
at least they finally
changed it up.
made something different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know. No, it's true. It's true. All right. Why don't we get into the we'll talk more about Captain Ferris, but why don't we get into the story slash characters? Because it's hard to just talk about the characters in a vacuum. So we'll do more spoilers because this really will get into the story now. But we talked about the setup of the game where you're shipping packages, and your ship goes down. You're brought into a black iron prison on Callisto, and you are seemingly falsely imprisoned. You eventually meet up with this guy Elias, who sort of helps you escape the prison. He has been there for 25 years, knows all the ins and outs, and helps you escape. And you never really know. I mean, at least with me, I don't know about you guys, but it always seemed like he was going to turn on you
Yeah, when this came up, I never trusted him basically until
until he was trustworthy to the end
yeah,
because
yeah,
he,
exactly.
he
Yeah.
he dies.
Yeah.
So so he
I wasn't
was.
sure if I should say it, but it's
No,
coming
no,
up anyway, so
we've given two
yeah.
spoiler alerts and we talked about the story and the
Yeah.
characters. I think it's all right.
But no,
Um,
I agree, Tom. I don't know how you felt.
Yeah,
I
no,
never
I felt the
trusted him.
same way. Yeah,
which I
he just seemed like you know he would double cross you, and I feel like in a game like that, you're kind of like meant to expect
yeah
that, especially just from strangers.
yeah. So I don't know if that was like a purposeful misdirection because like and good writing that they made him really seem shady and out for himself, but while trying to convince you in this very vulnerable position that he was there for you. But he was. He sort of
Yeah,
redeemed himself from whatever crimes he was there for.
yeah, and it wasn't overt. Like I didn't think it was overt. Like, oh, this guy is so slimy and whatever. It was
Yeah,
just
but
the
he seemed to always not have to get into the hairy situations, and you were
yeah,
always in the hairy
yeah,
situations.
yeah, definitely.
Like they didn't even like have like I don't think they had like a scene where he's like maybe where you're together and then you get separated, but like and like he was always sort of on the comms,
Yes. Yeah.
and sort of guiding you, but like never having to get his hands dirty. But whatever. So that was he was a cool character. Um, and then the other sort of main protagonist, but I guess you don't really know it at first, is Danny Nakamura, who is and that's Danny with an I. So she's sort of like a rebel against this company that has set up Black Iron Prison and everything going on on Callisto. So and she seemingly can't stand your character Jacob Lee from the very beginning, and is sort of ranting on how he's done something wrong or how could you and all of that. So you kind of just think you don't know what she is going to be, and then eventually gets to the point where you kind of have to team up with her, and you're both trying to escape. What do you guys think of her character?
Yeah. Well, like she starts, I guess, to trust Jacob after Jacob shows her what was in the ship in his ship that crashed, right? And she was expecting it to be some sort of basically bio virus or whatever that kind of caused this outbreak, right? Isn't that kind of how the story went? And then it actually was medical supplies or something. So then she started to trust Jacob.
Well, I don't think it was that because and this is a big part of the story, and I'd like to talk about it. But it's kind of shown to him at the end that he was transporting this bioweapon. That he was. I think it was sort of like locked in this tube, and so maybe if you like didn't open the tube, you kind of just thought it was regular medical supplies, but it turned out to be the thing that was causing this virus, not only in the Callisto, the prison on Callisto, but in Danny's home world of Europa, which wound up killing her little sister and causing this big outbreak there, and that's why so like
Yeah,
it's
you're
weird.
right. I mean, that's the whole point of the story, which I didn't miss. But
Yeah,
yeah, I guess maybe
Yeah,
Tom, do
there
you
is a
the
agree?
scene. There is a scene where
yeah,
they're in the ship together, and she's demanding that Jacob opens this case, and yeah, she what's in the case when it's revealed is not what she expects to be there.
Yeah, I
Um,
think she probably
and
thought
then
it to be. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. And then so, of course, she was dead set on like how Jacob was transferring the stuff, and there would be some incriminating evidence in his ship, and she didn't find any there.
Right. So, so you're traversing, you eventually you get outside of the prison. It's like this really snowy, part of the planet. You're fighting enemies in the snow, which was a little creepy. And then you get into then your goal is really to get onto a ship so you could leave the planet. Where she has some technical knowledge, and Jacob obviously is a pilot that can fly. So, they try to get to the to the ship, and and throughout you're kind of uncovering more and more. But I feel you don't really get the whole story until the end, and you meet some other sort of nefarious characters throughout the game. You meet Warden Cole, who's the warden of the prison. You meet Dr. Caitlin Mahler, or at least hear stories and audio logs of these people or other people talking about these people. And she's a scientist that is working with this virus. It's eventually revealed that Warden Cole is sort of orchestrating this whole outbreaks in various places. And with regard to the Black Iron prison on Callisto, it's to he's basically has inmates and is testing out this virus on them. And there's sort of the stereotypical villain. It's always the head of some like government organization or a huge company, but he's doing it for good. He's saying how we're going to need to populate other planets, and our evolution of our human selves has not progressed enough in order to do that. So this virus is going to allow us to do this because he has like the one example of it working, which I think was supposed to be Captain Ferris, correct?
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, see.
Yeah, so it's sort of like these ideas of grandeur that a lot of villains seem to have in either games or comic books or movies or whatever it is. You eventually get to a spot where it's you get your ship, and then Warden Cole like blows it up, so you're kind of stuck. Then you have to get to an escape pod, and of course there's only one, and it's you and Danny. And then that's with a little bit of help from Dr. Mahler. I guess she sort of sees the error of her ways, because I took her to be someone who was involved with this protocol at some point with the warden, and then sort of realized it was not good, and therefore helps Jacob.
Yeah, well, Danny gets infected, right? And
Right.
then the doctor helps Jacob and Danny get the antidote.
Hmm. Right. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then it winds up, you know, Jacob sort of just sort of this like rough and tumble guy, like nothing bad, but just and eventually at the end he puts Danny in the pod instead of him, and she gets to escape, and he is left on the planet, and is fighting enemies when you last see him. Um, and at that point, Warden Cole has instituted a self destruct system. And so the presumption is that he's going to die on, at the prison. And the thing I didn't like, and it's sort of like he's come to this realization. He's made this hero's journey, and he was sort of this nobody and didn't care about anyone. And then he saves Danny, and he's like, I deserve to be here, because it turns out that what he was transporting was the pathogen that killed the people on Europa and killed the people, caused this outbreak here. And I don't know, I just didn't buy it. He was sort of like smug and flippant about like checking the contents of the cargo, and was sort of just like, it's our job to, when his partner asked him, he was just like, our job is to just bring the cargo.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what I wanted to talk about. Like he didn't
he didn't know.
he didn't know, no, but I think my impression was that he knew maybe something was up, but he just wasn't gonna ask questions. He was just gonna do it. That that was my impression.
Yeah, I don't know, I
But he
didn't
didn't
love
he
I
didn't
didn't
know
love that.
exactly like what this was and what it's gonna do.
Yeah.
Oh. Wait, so I'm confused. What didn't you love about that?
I don't know. I don't think that action should make you have to, be tortured on a prison, face all of these awful monsters, and then eventually
Yeah,
blow up on it.
the crime didn't the punishment didn't fit the crime.
Yeah, in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
so I didn't realize because
Well,
like as I feel
If he
like
tr
go ahead.
he's
I was just
responsible. He's responsible for a lot of death. Well, he was part of an event or an action that caused a lot of deaths.
Yeah.
And basically, where you're saying you didn't really think he was holds that much responsibility for that
Yeah. I mean, I guess
event.
it's sort of like that's his whole character arc though, because like he went from not caring to, maybe caring a little too much, where he's like, I don't know. Maybe maybe I'd be a poor hero, but like it's so I don't know. But so I didn't love that part of the story. And the story was cool. Like the end does pick up and I liked it, but it's sort of a cliche kind of story, I feel.
Yeah, nothing world shattering for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean
yeah.
we've seen that in other survival horror games. It's like, the giant corporation has this, it's making bioweapons and it kind of gets out and causes all this
Yeah, it does kind
Yeah.
of
trouble.
feel bad also to like play as a character for a whole game and then at the end he just dies. And
Well, but that's the thing. They they do set it up for a sequel because, Danny escapes, so she could have been a protagonist of another story. And obviously Warden Cole is still out there and he's probably got plans and contingencies in place. And then Jacob, like it seems like he's gonna die, and then he gets a hologram of Dr. Mahler, and she's like, I could save you, but you have to go here quick or whatever. And that was, so
yeah, but
yeah,
so
there's hope for him too.
this leads into the DLC, which we can briefly touch on.
I just wanted to talk about
But
before we get into DLC, there was, you know, we talked about earlier about what was scary or not, and it was like I have to say that the very last shot of the game is probably one of the scariest because it's Dr. Mahler is talking to you, but she's a hologram. And then you see Ferris's mutated face come through that hologram. It's like, roar. And that's and then it goes, to the credits or whatever. So like I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
And
yeah,
just Jacob as a character, and then we'll get into, a little bit on the DLC. He seemed kind of boring at first, but I do think I don't know if that was intentional, but I don't know. I kind of still I felt like as the game went on, you sort of develop a rapport for him.
Yeah, I liked him, and he felt authentic and
Yeah.
like a real person to me. Like, oh, a lot of times in these games, the heroes are too heroic. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and
He,
you're playing sort of as like, you're not a police officer, you're not an army guy, you're not a, you
yeah,
know,
true.
scientist with all of the, it really is. You're just kind of like a regular person. I mean, he knows how to use guns as well and fight as well as a soldier would, but
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. He was good. Yeah, he was a good character. And the actor who played him was good too.
yeah, the
There
acting's
was
good in this
some,
game. The acting,
yeah,
I
for
don't
sure.
really, I can't really point to someone and say they did a poor performance in this. I don't think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was some like those corny lines that we love to have in survival horror games, but that's just that comes with the territory, I guess.
So, Tom, you talking about the DLC a little bit?
Yeah, so before we dive in, I just wanted to say that I'm not a fan of leaving a game story open and then finishing it in DLC. I think that's like a
Mhm.
cheap money grab, like, and it's
especially for
just
this
late.
game because it
Yeah,
wasn't that long.
Yeah,
that's
that's the
true
other thing we
too.
didn't talk about. It's about like 8 to 12 hours, depending on how much you like explore.
Yeah, do you guys have your statistics? My official playthrough was or game file time was 10 hours 48 minutes.
No, I don't have that, but I mean on the PlayStation app, it says like hours played, and I don't know how like to the minute that is, but mine says 14 hours actually.
Yeah, I mean I think that will tend to be a little higher than the actual file
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I will
time.
say this, like I feel I did die a lot in this game. I don't know if it
Yeah,
was like,
I was gonna
yeah,
say that too.
yeah.
Even though it
I don't know
wasn't
if it was a
really
lack
hard,
of interest, like,
yeah,
like,
that's kind of what
like
I
sort of like,
attributed
okay, I'm
to.
doing this again, and then you kind of get lazy, and then you die because the enemies did hit hard. Like it was easy to
Yeah,
dodge them, especially on a
Yes,
one-on-one fight, but they hit very hard.
they did. Yeah, which was maybe
Yeah, no,
more
I'm not
realistic,
complaining.
but
Yeah, I'm not
yeah, so
complaining about that specifically, but I'm just saying
yeah.
they did.
But the autosaves were pretty plentiful,
Yeah.
so you didn't really have to like. Sometimes I would just be like, let me just try and kill all these guys with just the stun baton, and then I would die, and I'd be like, all right, let me shoot
Oh,
them.
yeah, yeah. But
the
the I feel like the deaths were very concentrated in a few like parts of the
yeah.
game. Like I feel like 90% of my deaths were in the same, making up numbers, 7% of the game,
Yeah. Yeah, there were definitely a couple of parts. I mean, that part where you're on that moving vessel, like you have to get it started up and you're moving, and then all the enemies start coming.
Yeah.
I
Where
actually
if
died there a lot, but only because so I was using the grip and just tossing everyone off to the sides.
yeah.
But then, like I think the battery ran out, and then it was
hmm
it became tougher, and there was a bunch of phases of that scene. So
Yeah, that was definitely one of the times that I died a lot. But you had used that gravity glove and that
yeah.
I another part
Um.
I had a tough time with was when you in the snow and then I guess there's like a worker or something that's in one of
Oh
the
yeah, that I don't know if something glitched out on me, but like nothing happened at one point, and then I think I restarted or something, and then the next time you play through the whole thing again, and then he busts out, like he winds up getting mutated, and then he busts out, and you have to kill him too.
yeah, I don't know what the trigger event was. I think you had to
I think
I don't know
you
if it
had to
was
kill all
time
of the
or
enemies, and then a door would open,
Uh,
and then some more enemies would come, and then a door on the other side would open, right?
mhm. That
Something
might
like
have been
that.
it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
died a lot there.
And I just wanted to before I know this DLC talk is on hold for quite a while, but I just other things that I'm sort of remembering, and they're a little bit out of place, but just back to the graphics, like it was like you would hit an enemy and like the blood splatter would go on you or the wall, and like it was very realistic, I think, in some of those respects.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if this is the best spot for this little tidbit, but did you guys realize that this game was canceled in Japan?
No,
Yeah,
Cancel meaning they couldn't release it.
yeah, right.
why?
They basically the rating system. Well, the reason why I think is because of like dismemberment and decapitation.
Oh,
It's like so blatant and you know frequent. But yeah, the rating system there requested that they modify the game to meet the rating standards, and they refused.
oh wow. So it's not
Yeah,
out there.
that's my understanding. Yeah.
I
It's
wonder if
so
it's the same with
weird.
Dead Space because that was like dismemberment was like a big part of that
Yeah.
game too. Like I didn't think
Hmm.
there
Yeah.
was even trophies for like you dismembered this many
Oh,
limbs
really?
or something. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it could also be an evolving,
Issue.
sentiment. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, sure. And just for completion's sake, because I didn't say how many hours it took me. I don't have the exact number either, but on the PlayStation app for me it has 13 hours, so,
Hmm.
which
Okay.
I felt
Yeah.
was a little high. But yeah, I mean I think we're kind
We're
of
all about the same. Yeah.
around there.
And another point, I do feel this game was very linear. I mean, it was. I mean, there was a couple of times where there was two paths you can take, and one always led to the game progressing, and the other one led to like just an area where you get some items. So like there was never a decision to make. Like it was never like a path was cut off and you had to go another way, and then maybe circle back around. You kind of always moving forward in this, as opposed to other survival horror games where you're just sort of like looping around the same couple of locations, but just, you get a new key or you get a new item or something that it lets you to get into a different door or something. So this was, you know, different in that respect. Different than some games and similar to other survival horror games. I'm just kind of pointing it out. I'm not necessarily saying it was good or bad. It's just a fact of the game.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because it was incredibly linear, and I had like no grasp of the map at all, but I was always going the right way, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that kind of lends itself, I think, to all of us having about the same playtime,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, there
It
wasn't
was,
much else you can do except
yeah,
what
go
you
forward.
what you were supposed to do. Yeah.
DLC, Tom.
Yeah, so with regards to the DLC, basically just to keep it short, you end up playing as Jacob again. This is called Final Transmission, by the way, the name of the DLC. So you end up taking control of Jacob again, and the Dr. Mahler is, basically guiding you throughout this experience. She says that there's a transport ship that you can use to escape, but first you have to recover these data drives that she has so that you can expose Cole, and so that the world can know about his crimes and stuff like that. So anyway, you end up doing that. But then the payoff at the end is basically that wasn't what you just played wasn't actually what was happening in reality. So like Jacob is actually just laying there dying, and he was, fatally wounded in the events of the main game. Um, and so the doctor was using his body to, well, keeping him alive on life support, and then using him to basically transmit the evidence over to Danny because their implant things were linked
Right.
at that point.
Yeah, there's these all of the inmates and I think the soldiers were or officers and guards were fitted with these implants at the nape of their neck, which served as your sort of your
Your heads up display.
yeah, your HUD, your heads up display for your health. So that was, and that's similar in Dead Space had it on like the backpack or something, right, Tom?
Yeah, basically it goes up your spine.
Yeah, so it was like it wasn't like other games where you'd have to like click into the inventory and see what your health bar
Yeah,
was.
and that was cool too.
Yeah. Um, yeah,
But
so I
yeah,
wonder,
and so
yeah,
that's
go ahead.
basically how the DLC concludes. Like, the data is finished transmitting over to Danny,
And
and then Jacob dies, and
does
the
he die?
the
You like say you know like is it official that he dies?
I think it's strongly implied.
So
Yeah.
I wonder if it's sort
And
of like
I
yeah.
believe the whole thing, just that that location that they're in ends up imploding or whatever, collapsing.
Uh, so this is sort of like that little interim part between when you see him at the very end. Maybe he got to a place where Mahler could help him, or do you think he was like, yeah, I guess so. If she has him on life support, so he probably got badly wounded
Yeah,
in finding
Yeah.
her or finding
yeah,
that area, and then
he made it
just
somewhere else, but not. Yeah, he didn't make it far enough to actually survive.
And
all
just for
right.
full disclosure, Tom, you didn't actually play the DLC, right? That
Right,
was just
right,
from
yeah.
Yeah, I read a little bit about it too, but that was a good synopsis. I mean, it
it's
does sound
Yeah, it's
interesting. It's just, I mean, I think it sort of goes to the fact by like playing that, I think it just would have been more repetitiveness.
yeah. Yeah, it sounds like
yeah,
none of us are
because
really motivated to play the DLC.
yeah, the main game didn't leave me wanting to play more.
I wonder if I think this game was not really received that well, right? And I wonder if that led them to making that DLC in terms of the story. I wonder if like they
Like
initially
killing them
planned,
off.
yeah, basically. I wonder if they
Yeah,
initially planned for like sequels and things, and because it wasn't received well, they're just kind of like, let's kill this.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Maybe. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll go to this week's Would You Rather video game edition. All right, so for today's mid-episode filler Would You Rather question, we have been discussing the Callisto Protocol. And interesting about main protagonist Jacob Lee is that he seems pretty adept at firearms and shooting and things like that to try to get himself out of this prison. There's no indication that he's had any formal firearms training, so our question today is sort of, based off of that revelation. In a lot of these survival horror games, there are certain skills that the characters seem to have that might seem a little far-fetched or out of character. And we'd like to know if you can have one of these far-fetched skills that every character seems to have, which one would it be? 1. Firearms proficiency without firearms training. 2. The ability to fly an aircraft, particularly jets. Or 3. The ability to mix herbs and potions and other things to create healing items. We're gonna put up the poll on our social media, so give us a buzz on our social media and X and Instagram at Bros Boss Battles. That's BROS Boss Battles. You can leave a message on our website, brothersandbossbattles.com, on YouTube, or wherever you get this podcast. All right, let's see how Jacob's adventure turns out. Back to the regular show. All right, welcome back to the show. Just wanted to go through some of the character, the actors who played them and voiced them. And Josh Duhamel plays Jacob Lee. Karen Fukuhara plays Danny Nakamura, and Sam Witwer plays Captain Leon Ferris. Those are some of the main characters there, and the actors who have done done other things. All right, we're gonna probably get into our final thoughts and recommendations, but just wanted to throw it out to you guys. If you have anything to add, do now or forever hold your peace until the recommendation.
Yes, which we will be doing now. I have a couple of very quick things. First, so you guys both played on PS5, right?
Yes.
So I played on
Yeah,
PS4. I have the latest Xbox. I don't have a PS5, and the loading times were so bad. It was like I felt like I was playing Crash Bandicoot on PS2.
What? What? So, okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because a thing I didn't like is like when you died, there'd be like that pulsing red ring with like a black screen, and I felt like I got so annoyed at that because it's like you just died and it's annoying, but I think that
Well,
might have been a loading screen.
okay, because you could skip the death animations in this
No,
game.
the
I'm
death
pretty sure.
anime, but it's after
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. But okay, so just in general, did you even like if you were just loading up your game? Did you guys, if you guys didn't notice it like
No, I
very,
didn't.
then it must have been a PS4 thing.
Yeah, because I didn't notice
The
any
earlier
sort of
gen.
like I didn't notice any traditional loading things. Like
Oh, okay.
a thing I learned, and I think I kind of knew this in the recesses of my mind, but those scenes in these games where you're kind of like slipping through like a very thin crack in the wall kind of a thing, that's
Yeah,
actually a
yeah.
loading screen.
Oh, wow.
Like that's like loading the next room in a lot of these games. So
Yeah.
so
So
that was, and then that was in this game at times. So
another thing, which is probably like this, is some doors would say like processing
mm,
right before they opened. I don't know if you remember that, and like some of them took like 10 seconds, and like at first I
no,
was
that must
no, yeah, it must
have
have
to be
been
a
because of
PS4.
the
Yeah,
older, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. At first I was like, oh, are they just trying to build suspense? But then I kind of realized like I think it's just they're like loading up the next part of the map, so it's taking a long time. Okay, so yeah, that's what I suspected. It was just because I was on the older gen console.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Then one other thing I just wanted to mention, in case anybody in the audience, any of our listeners care, is that the game did have a prequel podcast called the Helix Station.
Mm.
I had absolutely no interest in listening to it after playing the game, so I didn't. And from what I
Yeah.
understand, it really doesn't tie into this story at all, like the story of the game. So, you know, anyway, just to throw it out there.
Do you know how long that is?
I want to say 6 episodes.
How long is each episode?
I don't know. 45 minutes to an hour.
Oh wow.
If they're like our episodes, it's probably 3 hours. No. Yeah, I don't know. I really had zero interest, like I said. So
Tom, did you know about that?
No, no, I hadn't heard about it. Also wouldn't have been compelled to listen to it either.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think Gwendolyn Christie is in that.
yeah, I don't
I'm
know who
looking
that
it
is,
up
but I
now.
think I think recognizable actors and actresses may have been in that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm looking it up now. The episodes are like 22 to 27 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So not bad. If anyone wants to check it out, if you like the game a little bit better than some of these guys did. I don't know. I feel like we all right, well, let's do our final thoughts, I guess. Tom, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'd love to. So yeah, this game started off really slow. I was not a fan of the melee combat. It took really a real long time to get going. And like I mentioned earlier, like there was a point where I was just like, man, why am I wasting time playing this game? Um, but eventually I got through that, and the game really did pick up quite a bit in the last, was it maybe 3 chapters? Um, dare I say they were even fun. There is fun to be had here. And yeah, if you're into like sounds and graphics and these new like next gen stuff, this game definitely did a great job, with those. So, it's not all bad. Um, in terms of recommending it, it's kind of tough because like it really is so unenjoyable at the beginning of the game, where it's like it's almost like not worth the struggling through all that just to get to the fun part. Yeah, I really wish they would have worked on the pacing of this game a little bit more to kind of even that out a bit, but they didn't. In terms of story, there's not too much revolutionary here, so I wouldn't even say like, play it for the story kind of thing. Um, I think I'm gonna have to give this one a non-recommend, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Uh, just yeah, it was too boring at the beginning of the game to make up for it, I think.
Yeah, I'll go next. I definitely agree with the early portion of the game. And I don't know, but by the end of it, I wanted to play more. I feel like this was a pretty even keeled episode. Like we definitely pointed out a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. Or a lot of there's nothing great about it, but it's also I also don't feel like it's horrible. And I do kind of feel that like it's weird. I wanted to move on to other games, but I also was like, oh, I wouldn't mind like trying to get a platinum trophy here on this one. It's got great graphics, got good sound. I think an important thing here with as far as what I'm saying is also about potentially replaying is it is a short game, and it has fun elements, and it might be interesting to play it again with keep your weapons and your credits and all of that. And I kind of like the world. I kind of like that they tried to build this world. Like, here's a podcast to listen to it, and here's some, DLC that fleshes out the story a little bit more. Despite also agreeing with Tom's point that I don't love when a DLC has to kind of flesh out the story more, but I don't necessarily know that you needed it to understand the story, maybe just to add a little bit more color to what was gonna happen in a potential sequel where it's like it's not gonna be Jacob. If it's gonna be anyone, it's likely gonna be Danny. So it's not a great game, but I'm gonna give it a recommend.
Oh my God, I couldn't believe you said you said you wanted to play more. It's just like
And by the
it's
end of it, I did. I really
I
did.
can't. I had the opposite experience. I was so glad it was over. But so it's not like it's like this horrible, frustrating, bad game. It's just like so boring. It's just a boring game. I don't know. Like the saving grace for me was that it was only 10, 11 hours for me. It was shorter than a lot of other games that we play. I I liked some things about it. I liked the different guns and the upgrade system and things like that. And we mentioned the gravity glove, which is cool and unique. But that's really the most positive thing I could say. Even like, at least it could have been scary, if not, boring, but at least scary. Didn't even really do that for me. This is clearly a not recommend for me.
All right, there you have it. I thought this was a good discussion. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Pete and Tom, for your analysis and opinions.
Sure, anytime.
This is Anthony, and until next time, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you for our next episode, which will be the third episode of our
Survival horror.
survival horror category. And
you didn't know it was survival horror because the game was so not scary.
and then after that, the 3 games: The Evil Within, Callisto Protocol, and the game we will be discussing next episode will join the battle arena and take up arms against each other. We'll see which one comes out on top. Until then, take care, everyone, and goodbye.